You know when you think you know the people closest to you? When you believe that no matter what problems exist, certain lines would never be crossed. Well, I thought so too. My name is Marina, I'm 29 years old, and this is the story of how I discovered that some people are capable of anything to get what they want. It was a Thursday in March when I received news of my promotion. After 4 years working as a project manager at a tech company in Austin, Texas, I would finally be commercial director. I couldn't stop smiling at the office. The salary increase was 40%, and I'd be leading international projects I'd dreamed about for years. I immediately called David, my husband, and Beatrice, my younger sister, to share the joy. Let's celebrate at Terzo tonight, I suggested. Terzo was that chic Italian restaurant where a meal cost more than most people's weekly grocery budget. But I could afford it. I'd worked incredibly hard for this moment, and I wanted to share it with the two people I loved most. I arrived first, wearing that navy blue dress David always said looked perfect on me. I chose a table in a more secluded corner because I wanted privacy to celebrate this milestone. The dining room was full of executives and elegant couples, the kind of environment where I felt comfortable after years building my career brick by brick. When I saw them arriving together, I found it strange. Beatrice was radiant, with a smile I hadn't seen in a long time. David seemed nervous, which I initially attributed to discomfort in expensive places. He always got a bit uncomfortable around luxury. But there was something different that night, and a tension in the air that I couldn't identify, like the static electricity before a lightning strike. Congratulations on the promotion, Mari. Beatrice hugged me with suspicious effusiveness. She was never very demonstrative with affection, especially with me. There had always been a strange distance between us, a competitiveness I tried to ignore. We ordered a $200 bottle of Chianti, and I started telling them about the new projects I would lead, the incredible salary increase, the possibilities for international growth. My words tumbled out in excitement. I'd worked 60-hour weeks for months to earn this. I'd sacrificed weekends, missed social events, poured everything into my career. Beatrice listened with too much attention, her eyes fixed on me in a way that should have warned me. David kept fidgeting with his napkin, folding and refolding it nervously. Actually, Beatrice interrupted in the middle of my excitement, we also have news to share. She took David's hand across the table, and my stomach knotted inexplicably. Something in her tone, in the way she looked at me, set off alarm bells in my subconscious. I am pregnant. The world stopped, literally stopped. The restaurant voices became a distant buzz, like I was underwater. The lights seemed to flicker, and I stared at my sister's hand intertwined with my husband's as if it were a mirage that couldn't possibly be real. Pregnant. Beatrice was pregnant. With David's child. I know it's a complicated situation. David spoke for the first time since they arrived, his voice strained and guilty. But it happened. We fell in love. They watched me with a mixture of expectation and poorly disguised satisfaction. It was as if they were waiting for me to explode, scream, make a scene that would give the other table something interesting to talk about later. I could see it in their eyes. They planned this moment, rehearsed it, anticipated my breakdown. But I couldn't do anything except stare, my mind trying to process the impossible. My sister Beatrice, whom I'd helped pay for college when our parents couldn't afford it, was there holding my husband's hand, pregnant with his child, telling me this on the day of my promotion. The day that was supposed to be about celebrating my success had become the stage for my complete humiliation. Throughout childhood, Beatrice lived in my shadow, and this irritated her deeply. I was the older daughter, the responsible one, the one who got good grades without having to try too hard. She was the youngest, the spoiled one, the one our parents protected from everything. But for some reason, being the baby of the family was never enough for her. She wanted what I had, but she wanted it handed to her. We grew up in a middle-class family in San Antonio. Our father worked as an accountant at an oil company, pulling in decent money. Our mother was an elementary school teacher, dedicated and nurturing. We weren't rich, but we didn't lack anything either. We had a comfortable 3-bedroom house, annual vacations to Galveston, and enough for dance lessons and sports equipment. Even so, Beatrice always had the impression that she deserved more, that life owed her something it had given me unfairly. When I got a full scholarship to study business administration at the University of Texas, Beatrice made sure to say it was rich girl's luck, as if merit scholarships were handed out randomly. When I graduated with honors and got an internship at a multinational corporation in Austin, she commented that I always knew how to sell myself, implying my success was about manipulation rather than competence. When I bought my first apartment at 25, a beautiful 2-bedroom in downtown Austin, she asked if I wasn't being too ambitious, as if wanting nice things through hard work was somehow arrogant. The worst part is that she really believed she deserved the same things I had, but without the effort. As if success was a matter of luck or favoritism, not the result of working 12-hour days, taking night classes, networking constantly, and sacrificing social life for career advancement. Beatrice studied graphic design at a public university. She graduated without much distinction, and since then jumped from job to job as a freelancer, always complaining that clients didn't recognize her potential or pay her what she was worth. In her mind, the world was conspiring against her, not recognizing her innate talent. Our parents always tried to balance things out, as if my success was something that needed to be compensated for. When I bought my new Honda Civic after my first major promotion, they bought a used one for her too, even though she hadn't saved a penny. When I started earning well and moved to my nice apartment, they increased the financial help they gave her to pay rent for a small studio in downtown San Antonio. It was as if they were trying to keep Beatrice at the same level artificially, creating an illusion of equality that had nothing to do with reality. And this only fed her sense of entitlement. She always asked about my salary with an intensity that bothered me. "How much are you making now, Mari?" "Just sisterly curiosity," she'd say. But there was something calculated in the way she asked, as if she were taking inventory of my assets, measuring the gap between us. She'd inquire about my investments, the apartment's value, my bonuses. "Wow, that's amazing," she'd say with a smile that never reached her eyes. "You're so lucky." Now I understood it wasn't curiosity at all. It was pure envy mixed with greed that I'd refused to see because she was my sister, and I wanted to believe family meant something. When I met David at a work party 5 years ago, Beatrice made sure to comment that he wasn't my type. David was handsome, charming, and worked as a salesman at a BMW dealership. He earned reasonably well by Texas standards, about $5,000 a month with commissions, but nothing compared to my salary that had quickly climbed to $12,000. Still, I fell in love. He was fun, affectionate, made me laugh after stressful days at the office dealing with impossible deadlines and difficult clients. David had a simplicity that attracted me, an uncomplicated way of seeing life that contrasted with my nature of always planning 3 steps ahead, always strategizing for the next career move. Beatrice was always polite with David in person, but I noticed a certain tension, especially when we all went out together and the bill arrived. David sometimes felt embarrassed when I paid for restaurants that cost $100 per person, or when we bought concert tickets that cost $200 each. I could see him calculating in his head, knowing these expenses were beyond his comfortable budget. Beatrice observed all this with that calculating look I knew well but preferred to ignore, not wanting to acknowledge what I was seeing. "You support him, don't you?" she asked once when David went to the bathroom during a family lunch. "I don't support him," I replied, irritated by the implication. "We split things proportionally to our income." It was true. David paid for groceries, gas, and some household bills, maybe $300 to $400 monthly. I covered the apartment financing, condo fees, utilities, insurance, and everything else. It worked for us. We were partners building a life together, and I didn't mind contributing more since I earned more. But for Beatrice, that was just more proof that I had too much: a brilliant career, a beautiful apartment, a dedicated husband, investments that grew month by month. As if I hadn't fought for every single achievement, as if everything had simply fallen from the sky into my lucky lap. "How long?" I managed to ask, my voice coming out strangely calm, as if it belonged to someone else entirely. 3 months, Beatrice replied, running her hand over her still imperceptible belly with a proprietary gesture that made my stomach turn. 3 months. It had started right after my birthday in December. It was now March. 3 months of betrayal, 3 months of lies, 3 months of them laughing at me while I worked 12-hour days to get the promotion I'd so desperately wanted to share with the people I loved. "Marina, say something," David asked, and for the first time in years, I really looked at him. Really paid attention to the man I'd been married to for 4 years. He looked relieved, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders, as if this confession was liberating for him rather than devastating for me. "What do you want me to say?" I asked, still in that strange, detached voice. "Congratulations." Beatrice laughed nervously, but there was genuine amusement in it. "Look, Mari, I know it's not easy, but these things happen. Love is love, right? And the baby." She ran her hand over her belly again, more deliberately this time. "The baby needs both parents together." The audacity was breathtaking. She was sitting across from me, holding my husband's hand, pregnant with his child, and asking me to congratulate them. As if I should be happy about their happiness, built on the ruins of my marriage. I picked up my purse slowly, deliberately. I left 2 $50 bills on the table, more than enough to cover my portion of the untouched meal, and stood up with as much dignity as I could muster. "I'm going home. You two do whatever you want." As I walked toward the exit on shaking legs, I heard David calling my name, but I didn't turn around. In the wall mirror near the entrance, I could see their reflections still sitting at the table. Beatrice was smiling, actually smiling, as if she just won some competition I hadn't known we were in. I drove home in a daze, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The Austin streets blurred past, familiar routes that suddenly felt foreign. When I pulled into my building's parking garage, I sat in the car for 20 minutes, unable to make myself go upstairs to the apartment that now felt contaminated by lies. The apartment was exactly as I'd left it that morning, made bed, dishes washed, everything in its place. It was surreal how life could completely fall apart while physical spaces remained exactly the same. David's toothbrush was still in the bathroom, his clothes hung in the closet, that ridiculous Dallas Cowboys mug he'd gotten in a dealership promotion sat in the kitchen cabinet. I sat on the beige leather sofa in the living room, still in my dress and high heels, and stared into the void. My head was strangely quiet, as if my brain had shut down the emotion processing system to protect me from complete collapse. I knew I should be crying, screaming, breaking things. But all I felt was numbness, like when you hit your elbow hard and can't feel your arm for a few minutes. David didn't come home that night. At 2 a.m, I received a text message. "I'm at B's house. We'll talk tomorrow." B. He called my sister B, a nickname that implied intimacy, years of closeness. As if they'd been together forever. As if I didn't exist, or our 4 years of marriage were just an inconvenient obstacle that had finally been removed from their path. I spent the night awake, walking through the 120 square meters of the apartment, trying to understand how I'd gotten there. How hadn't I noticed the signs? Were there signs I'd missed? Now that I thought about it with this new, painful clarity, Beatrice had appeared in Austin a lot in recent months. "I came to see some clients," she'd say. Working as a freelance graphic designer made it plausible that she had projects in the city. But Austin was only an hour and a half from San Antonio. Why did she always stay in hotels? Why didn't she ever ask to sleep on my couch like she used to when we were closer? The answer was obvious now. She was staying with David, probably in cheap motels where they could hide their affair. While I was at the office closing deals and preparing presentations, they were building a relationship behind my back. When the sun rose, I was still on the couch with my dress wrinkled and makeup smeared down my cheeks. My iPhone showed 17 missed calls from my mother. Beatrice had told her everything, probably in a romanticized version where they were star-crossed lovers who couldn't resist fate's cruel joke of meeting through me. 3 days after that nightmare dinner, I was sitting in my home office, surrounded by financial documents I needed to organize for the inevitable divorce. I'd called in sick to work, something I never did, because I couldn't face my colleagues' congratulations about the promotion while my personal life was imploding. I opened the green folder where I kept our marriage documents, pulling out papers I hadn't looked at in years. Birth certificate, marriage certificate from Travis County, various legal forms. Then I stopped, frowning at something I'd nearly forgotten. Property regime, complete separation of assets. Why complete separation? Most couples in Texas chose community property, where assets acquired during marriage are split 50-50. That's when the memory surfaced like a life raft in stormy seas. Prenuptial agreement. I'd insisted on making a prenuptial agreement 4 years ago, back when I was 25 and buying my first apartment. My hand started shaking as I ran to the small safe I'd installed in the bedroom closet. I'd opened it so rarely that I almost forgot the combination, my birthday inverted. Inside, between the apartment deed and my passport, was a sealed envelope with the official seals of Travis County Clerk's Office. Prenuptial agreement, Marina Santos Silva and David Oliveira Ferrer. I tore it open with trembling fingers, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I vaguely remembered insisting on this document at the time, but the details were hazy. It had been 4 years ago, and I'd been so in love and happy that the legal aspects seemed like just necessary formality to officialize our love. But now, alone in my bedroom, holding those pages printed on law firm letterhead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in days, a hint of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I wouldn't lose everything I'd built. The memory came back in vivid detail. It was a sunny Saturday in April, 2 weeks before our wedding. I just signed the purchase contract for my first apartment, a modern 2-bedroom loft that cost $350,000. David was stressed about ceremony preparations. "Mari, are you sure you need all this?" he'd said, looking at the vendor list spread across my kitchen table. $15,000 for catering, $8,000 for photography, $12,000 for decoration. It's so much money. It was a lot of money, especially for him, earning maybe $4,000 a month at the dealership. For me, fresh off a substantial promotion and earning $12,000 monthly, it was an investment in our special day. That's when my lawyer, Dr. Patricia Williams, had suggested the prenuptial agreement during our meeting about the apartment purchase. "Marina, you're young, successful, and accumulating assets rapidly. A prenup is sensible, especially with significant difference in assets between spouses. It's not mistrust, it's intelligent protection." When I'd mentioned it to David on a Tuesday evening, he'd actually laughed. "Prenuptial? Isn't that rich people nonsense? We love each other, Mari. Love doesn't need papers. It's not about love, David. It's legal protection for both of us." "Nothing will go wrong," he'd interrupted, pulling my hand across the table. "We're going to be happy forever. You're being paranoid, baby." He'd eventually agreed when I explained it would make me more comfortable. "If it's important to you, fine. But honestly, I think you're complicating something that should be simple." Now, reading through the document at 3 a.m, I finally understood the value of that rich people nonsense. Complete separation of assets. Each spouse shall maintain individual ownership of all property owned prior to marriage and all property acquired during the marriage. Every word was like a shield protecting me. The apartment I'd bought before getting married. The investments I'd made monthly. The stock portfolios. The stake in the tech startup I'd purchased 2 years ago. All of it was exclusively mine. In the event of dissolution of marriage, there shall be no division of property, with each party retaining the entirety of their individual assets. David had no right to anything. Absolutely nothing of what I'd built. I kept reading, looking for loopholes, some clause that could complicate things. But there weren't any. Dr. Williams had done impeccable work. The contract was crystal clear, comprehensive, and bulletproof. Spousal support waiver. Both parties hereby waive any right to spousal support, alimony, or maintenance from the other party. Alimony. David had no right even to alimony. And considering he earned much less than me, theoretically he would be the one who could ask for financial support in Texas. But he'd waived that right 4 years ago, signing page after page without truly understanding what he was giving up. For the first time in 3 days, I smiled. A small smile, but genuine. David had signed his own financial death sentence without even realizing it. And Beatrice had probably seduced my husband thinking he would be her gateway to a financially comfortable life, a shortcut to the success she felt she deserved. The irony was delicious. I continued reading the specific clauses with growing satisfaction. Debt separation, each party responsible for their own debts. Future businesses and corporate participation remained individual. Intellectual property, royalties, and patents were not shared. Inheritance and gifts received from family remained with the original recipient. It was complete armor, legally impenetrable. I took my laptop and started making a detailed inventory of my current assets. The apartment, now valued at least $400,000. investments in stocks and mutual funds totaling about $100,000. My stake in the tech startup, worth at least $50,000 based on the latest funding round. Checking and savings accounts with $40,000. My paid-off Honda Civic, valued at $20,000. More than $600,000 in net worth at 29 years old. And David had no right to any of it. Even better, my new salary as commercial director would be $16,000 monthly, plus performance bonuses that could reach $20,000 in the best quarters. Meanwhile, David would continue earning his $4,000 or $5,000 monthly selling cars. But there was more. In Texas, child support for one child is typically 20% of net income. If David earned $5,000 gross, after taxes he'd keep about $3,800 net. 20% of that meant $760 per month, automatically deducted, until the child turned 18. For the first time since that horrible dinner, I managed to sleep a few hours. And I dreamed about my future, a future where I was completely free, unburdened by people who'd tried to steal what I'd built. 3 weeks after the betrayal, I called Beatrice. She answered on the second ring, as if she'd been waiting for me to reach out. Marie, so good that you called. We really need to talk. Hi, B, I said, using David's nickname for her deliberately. Look, I've thought a lot about this whole situation, and I think you guys are right. There's no point in holding grudges. We're adults. These things happen. Silence on the other end. She wasn't expecting this reaction. She'd probably been preparing for drama, for me to beg or threaten. Really? You're okay with this? I'm trying to accept it. I mean, you fell in love, right? It wasn't anyone's fault. And now there's the baby to think about. I kept my voice light, almost cheerful. Well, Marie, you can't imagine how relieved I am hearing this. David was so worried, thinking you were going to make everything complicated. The divorce and everything. Make everything complicated. As if I were the problem in this scenario, not the two people who betrayed me. Not at all. Can we meet to talk about how to resolve everything without fights? Just to settle things like adults. Maybe dinner again, but this time for closure. That would be great. Beatrice sounded genuinely happy. David will be so relieved. He was afraid you'd, well, make a scene. No scenes. Let's meet at Terzo again, since that's where it all started. Saturday night. Perfect, Mar. You can't imagine how important this is for us, especially with the baby coming. I hung up smiling. Saturday night would be very interesting indeed. I spent the following days preparing like an actress rehearsing for the performance of her life. I chose an elegant black dress that conveyed seriousness and control. I practiced in the mirror maintaining a calm, resigned expression. My lawyer Helena thought the idea was risky. Marina, are you sure you want to do this? It might be more efficient to simply notify them through formal legal channels. Helena, they humiliated me in public. They planned everything to see me fall apart in front of a restaurant full of people. They deserve the same treatment. Saturday arrived. I got to Terzo punctually at 8, requesting the same table as before. The maitre d' recognized me and commented about hoping tonight would be happier. If only he knew what was coming. David and Beatrice arrived together, but this time the atmosphere was completely different. They were relaxed, smiling, holding hands like a couple in love who could finally show themselves publicly. Beatrice wore a dress that highlighted her small but noticeable pregnancy bump. Marie! Beatrice hugged me with genuine warmth. You look beautiful. Is that dress new? Thank you. You both look well too. How's the pregnancy going? Great. We're already thinking about names. David wants Michael if it's a boy. I prefer Gabriel. David pulled out Beatrice's chair with a chivalrous gesture he'd rarely made for me during our marriage. Marina, thank you for agreeing to talk peacefully. I was afraid you'd, well, you know. Make drama? Imagine that, David. We're all adults here. We order the same bottle of Chianti as last time. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. They thought they'd won the grand prize. Access to my money, my assets, my hard-earned success. So, David said after the first sip, about the divorce. We wanted to propose doing everything amicably. Divide things fairly without complications. Divide things fairly, I repeated slowly, savoring the words. Tell me more about this. What do you consider fair? Beatrice and David exchanged a quick glance. They'd rehearsed this conversation, prepared their pitch. "Well, we can sell the apartment and split it 50-50, David began. "The investments too. And with your new promotion, alimony will help a lot until I can stabilize financially with B and the baby." Alimony? He genuinely believed I would pay him alimony while he raised a child with my sister. The audacity was almost impressive. I slowly picked up my purse as if looking for something specific. They watched expectantly, probably thinking I was going to pull out divorce documents for us to sign right there, some friendly agreement that would benefit them immensely. Instead, I placed the courthouse envelope with the prenuptial agreement on the table. The paper, slightly yellow by time, made a crisp sound when it hit the wood. "Before we talk about division," I said calmly, "I need to clarify something important that you seem to have forgotten." David frowned, staring at the envelope. "What's that?" "Our prenuptial agreement. David, remember the one you signed 4 years ago, saying it was rich people nonsense?" The color drained from his face instantly. Beatrice looked confused, her eyes darting between us. "What agreement? You made a prenuptial agreement." "We did, and David signed it without even reading it properly." I took the pages out and placed them on the table, open so both could see. "Complete separation of assets. Do you remember what that means?" David picked up the pages with trembling hands, his eyes scanning lines he clearly hadn't understood 4 years ago. "Calm down, Mari," Beatrice said, her voice losing its previous confidence. "Even with an agreement, you were married. There's community property, division of assets acquired during marriage. Not when there's complete separation of assets, Beatrice." I pointed to the specific clause, reading aloud. "Each spouse shall maintain individual ownership of all property owned prior to marriage and all property acquired during the marriage. Everything acquired during our marriage also stays with whoever acquired it." "But this can't be legal," David protested, his voice rising. "The apartment, the investments. I live there. I contributed to expenses. You contributed $300 a month for groceries and gas, David. I paid $1,800 for the mortgage, $200 for condo fees, plus utilities, internet, phone, insurance. Your $300 doesn't give you property rights over a $400,000 apartment." Beatrice frantically flipped through the pages, looking for some loophole, some salvation for their plan. "But alimony," she insisted. "He has a right to alimony." I smiled for the first time that evening. Page 5, Section 3. Spousal support waiver. Both parties hereby waive any right to spousal support, alimony, or maintenance. David waived his right to alimony when he signed this document. I didn't know what I was signing. David shouted, drawing attention from neighboring tables. "You tricked me." "I tricked you?" "David, you were present when the lawyer explained each clause in detail. You said you understood. There are witnesses. Everything is registered at the courthouse. You signed 15 pages. The expression on Beatrice's face was transforming from confusion to horror as reality crashed down like a tidal wave. "You mean he has no right to anything?" Her voice came out as a whisper. "Nothing. Zero. Zilch. Nada." I put the papers back in the envelope deliberately. David leaves the marriage exactly as he entered, with his financed pickup truck, his clothes, and his credit card debts. David ran his hand over his face, the magnitude of his mistake finally hitting him. "Marina, for God's sake, we can talk about this. You can't leave me with nothing. I'm going to have a child to support." "You are going to have a child to support," I emphasized, "with your car salesman's salary, which, by the way, with child support obligations will be quite tight." "Child support?" Beatrice asked weakly. "Of course. The father has to pay child support. In Texas, it's usually 20% of net income for one child. If David earns $5,000 gross, about $3,800 remains after taxes. 20% of that is $760 per month, automatically deducted from his paycheck until the child turns 18. They looked at each other in panic. They clearly hadn't done these calculations, hadn't thought through the actual financial reality of their situation. Plus medical expenses, daycare when necessary, clothes, education. It's going to be quite expensive to have a baby, guys. David sank into his chair like a deflating balloon. "My God, Marina, how can you be so cold? So calculating? Calculating? Me. You two planned this betrayal for months, humiliated me publicly in the same restaurant on the day of my promotion, and I'm the calculating one. Beatrice was clearly doing mental math, her face growing paler by the second. If David earned $5,000 a month and paid $800 in support, $4,200 would remain. After taxes and deductions, maybe $3,400 net. To support him, her, and a baby. Beatrice, how much do you earn as a freelancer again? I asked, knowing the answer perfectly well. It varies. About $2,000 a month when I have projects. So you'll be living on maybe $5,400 monthly at best, for 3 people. Living where? At my house in San Antonio, she murmured. That 1-bedroom apartment you rent for $800? It's going to be cramped with a baby, don't you think? The silence at the table was deafening. Around us, other diners enjoyed their meals, completely oblivious to the financial catastrophe unfolding just meters away. Marina, David tried once more, his voice desperate now. Are you really going to do this? Leave us with nothing? I know we hurt you, but... David, you didn't just hurt me. You tried to rob me. You thought I was an emotional idiot who would hand over half of my $600,000 net worth because you claimed to be in love. You calculated wrong. $600,000? Beatrice repeated, incredulous. Surprise. I'm actually much wealthier than you imagined. And now with the promotion, I'll earn $16,000 a month while you two fight over money for diapers. David buried his face in his hands. I'm an idiot. A complete idiot. Finally, I said, something we agree on. Beatrice tried one last desperate card. Mari, you're my sister. We've always been family. You can't abandon us like this. What about your niece or nephew? Don't you want to help? I looked at her directly, making sure she saw no sympathy in my eyes. Beatrice, you tried to steal my husband thinking you'd steal my fortune along with him. You calculated wrong. Now you'll have to live with the consequences of your choices. But family doesn't betray family. Family doesn't humiliate family in public restaurants. Family doesn't seduce their sister's husband out of greed. I stood up from the table, leaving 2 $50 bills again. Your lawyers can contact mine, Helena Williams in Houston. She has all the necessary documentation. Marina, wait! David stood up, trying to follow me. No, David. You waited. You waited 4 months to tell me the truth. You waited until the day of my promotion to maximize my humiliation. You waited until you thought you had everything planned perfectly. Now I'm going to make you wait. Wait for what? Beatrice asked, tears beginning to form. Wait to see what it's like to be poor. What it's like to live counting every penny. What it's like not being able to afford dinner at a $200 restaurant. Maybe now you'll understand why I work so hard to have what I have, and why I protect what's mine. I stopped at the door, looking back at both of them one last time. My story isn't about revenge. It's about justice. It's about protecting what you build, and learning that not everyone deserves access to your life.